our truth and our humanity is reflected in the story that's being told. And it's much more entertaining that way. So that's what we have to be thinking about first, whether we're telling a story or we're just reporting information. Reporting information is the equivalent of a book report, and no one has ever wanted to hear a book report.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fun one. Our guest is the author of Stories Sell, Story-Worthy Strategies to Grow Your Business and Brand, Matthew Dix. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you. Now, telling stories, I know I love stories, and I'm sure that's a big piece of why they work, but I'd love to hear your backstory and how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Well, it started, I could go all the way back to when I was a boy, but I guess it really got started in 2011 when I was encouraged to go to New York City and perform for The Moth, a storytelling organization, true stories told on stage without notes.
Wow.
And my friend said, go do that. You've had a terrible life where you have great stories to tell, which is not a nice thing to say to your friend. But I agreed, thinking I would tell one story and that would be the end of it. I'd get on a stage and tell a story and be finished. And, I went to New York, and with my wife, I got into the venue. I dropped my name into the hat. They only draw 10 names out of the hat over the course of the night. And so as soon as I put my name in the hat, I prayed that they would not draw my name and I could go home and say I tried and my friends would leave me alone. But the 10th name that came out of that hat that night was my name, and I got on the stage. I hated every minute of that evening until I began speaking into the microphone.
Wow.
And at that moment, I sort of fell in love with what I was doing. And so I thought I was going to be someone who told stories on stages around the world, ideally, and eventually that happened for me. But I thought that would be what I did. And then back in 2013, I was doing a benefit, sort of a charity event. And after I had performed for about an hour, I went to the reception and I was drinking fruit punch when this man, Boris Levin, approached me. He's the CEO of Mott Corporation. And he said, I want you to teach me what you just did on that stage so that I can do better business, essentially. And I told Boris, I don't do that. I tell stories to entertain people. I don't know how to insert storytelling into business. And he said, no, I think you do. And, I agreed to have a meeting with him. And about 10 minutes into that meeting, I realized that I had a lot to share in order to help him. So he's been my client ever since then. And along the way, sort of astoundingly, like in a way that I can't quite understand, I now work for the likes of Amazon and Microsoft and Salesforce. I was in Washington last week at the Quantico at the FBI teaching their hostage negotiation unit how to tell stories. I've worked with Olympic athletes and people who have summited Mount Everest, Native American tribes. Like, it's just crazy the number of people and the types of people I've gotten to work with over the last decade, sort of accidentally and unintentionally, but blessedly so.
Wow, quite an amazing trajectory, and literally falling into this career with no intention whatsoever.
Yeah.
Amazing. Why are the stories so powerful to humans?
Well, at our base level, we're actually biologically positioned and programmed to receive stories for most of human existence. For the hundreds of thousands of years that humans have existed on the planet, we have not been able to transfer information in written form from one person to another. It's only been in like the last 1% of human existence that we actually figured out how to do this. So for most of our lives, or for most of human lives, we could only transfer information from generation to generation through storytelling. So our brains are actually biologically programmed to receive a story. So if I start telling you a story right now, your brain releases chemicals, whether you like it or not. And those chemicals cause you to feel more connected to me. They make you feel better about the world, and they improve your cognition. And all of that is designed such that when you hear a story, your brain says, pay attention, this might save your life. And there was a time in human history when that was true. Don't go into that valley. Lions live in that valley, or don't eat the berries off this bush because they'll kill you. Our brains are programmed to receive stories as a means of survival. Today, we don't have to sort of survive that way, but our companies have to survive. We have to find ways to help our children learn better, help our students learn better, convey ideas to, I don't know, our constituencies, our clients, our customers. And the same biology works for us. If I tell you a story, you like me more, you feel better about the world, your cognition improves. And that's sort of priming the brain for whatever message I have to deliver.
Wow. What is it about the stories that, people talk, they open their mouth and there's information, right? And then there's stories. What, what are the differences between just information coming out? Like you said, don't eat those berries. Well, there's a story you could tell me about that. I'd probably remember that a lot better. And that's
Right.
how that went. So what are some of the differences?
Well, the first thing people have to understand is what a story is, because most people think if something happened to me, I will tell you what happened to me, and therefore I have told you a story. And that's not a story. That's called reporting on your life.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody likes that. That's why we have spouses and mothers. They're the only ones who essentially want us to report on our lives,
Uh-huh.
So a story is about change over time. It is a moment of realization or transformation. It's that moment in your life when you go, oh, or aha, or I got it finally. I understand. That's what a story is. That's why every movie, every book, every Broadway show, every television show eventually leads to a character changing in some fundamental way, usually becoming a better version of themselves, but sometimes not. Like we have a lot of anti-heroes in the world today. If you watch Breaking Bad, that is the story of a man changing in a bad way, in an unfortunate way. He is literally breaking bad. But that's what stories are. They have to reflect change over time. And when that happens, we feel more connected, and we feel like our truth and our humanity is reflected in the story that's being told. And it's much more entertaining that way. So that's what we have to be thinking about first, whether we're telling a story or we're just reporting information. Reporting information is the equivalent of a book report, and no one has ever wanted to hear a book report.
Or write one.
Or write one.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. Hey, bookkeepers, are you tired of juggling spreadsheets, chasing down receipts, and spending endless hours on client deliverables? It's time to simplify your workflow with Hub Analytics. Hub Analytics is the financial platform built just for you. We streamline bookkeeping operations so you can focus on what really matters, delivering high-quality results for your clients. With our easy-to-use tools, you'll save time, reduce errors, and gain deeper insights into your clients' financials. Imagine having all your financial data in one place with real-time analytics and customized reports at your fingertips. No more late nights, no more stress, just efficient, accurate bookkeeping that makes you look like the hero you are. Ready to take your bookkeeping to the next level? Visit hub-analytics.com to start your free trial today. Hub Analytics, where smarter bookkeeping begins. Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview. So now you're telling a story and a business person came up to you and said, I need you to help me in my business. And that's maybe a tough part that many people would have. It's like, okay, how do you connect story to business?
So there's many ways to do it. If you're a leader, that's probably the easiest way, which is I need to communicate to my people, my employees, a message, an idea. And I can either say the idea, I can say we all need to work harder, or I can tell a story from my life where I learned at some point in my life that hard work pays off, or even better, I need to tell a story about a time when I didn't work hard and things went bad. And I tell that story as a means of landing an idea, a message, imagery, memorable moments into someone's heart and mind. And then I can follow that story with, that is why we all need to start working harder. So that's a simple way to include storytelling. It also allows leaders to be more transparent to their people. So rather than sort of being the monolith at the top of the organization, you become a person who has children and a spouse and a cat and hobbies and things you like and things you don't like. That's all really powerful. That makes people feel more connected to you. The more complex but very doable kind of story is, I've built a new product. I have a service to offer. I've improved upon a product that I once had, and now I need to tell a story about that. So that's not just listing features, explaining why the price makes sense, telling you what my company can do for you, but actually showing you in a memorable, entertaining, meaningful, impactful way how my product, my service can benefit your life, and how I have worked like hell to get it to that point where it can benefit your life. Those kinds of stories can be really powerful. And we see them in commercials all the time. We see them in marketing decks and plans like that, but it gets lost by the wayside quite often. And we often default into simple explanations, listing of features, listing of prices, testimonials. Those don't amount to stories either. That's just someone else reporting on you. That's not a story. It's probably not even true half the time. So we want to find a way to connect with the heart and mind when we have one of those products, one of those services, one of those platforms, whatever we're building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I think you're right. It gets I find it challenging myself to make sure there's enough of both, right? And it's interesting, right on the money here in terms of just what I heard recently, which kind of shocked me, is my niece was coming to take care of my daughter, who I had to pick up at camp early today. She was talking about her principal, who had given the final speech or something at their graduation. She's just graduating high school. And she says, he's always telling these stories. And, they're always personal stories. And it's so annoying. And I'm like, but I like the stories. It's like, it was the first time I'd ever heard someone say that the person tells too many stories. And I just thought it was interesting that, the younger generation, but maybe the way he's telling those stories are not coming across as stories. They're maybe just fact telling, or there's some formula missing there. But I guess it's part of that. Can you overdo story?
Not if you're entertaining. If you are genuinely entertaining, I don't think you can overdo it. It's sort of like, can you overdo chocolate if you like chocolate? I mean,
no.
Eventually it might get full, but you're never like, please, no more chocolate, right?
Yeah.
So if you're telling an entertaining story, you really probably can't overdo it. I'm only as successful as an elementary school teacher because I tell my students stories relentlessly, and they love them. Now, I'm a professional storyteller, so I'm engaging and entertaining with my kids, but the woman who teaches across the hall from me, she's a superior teacher in every way. She designs better lessons. She delivers them better. She understands the curriculum better. I'm in my room telling my kids stories about me to encourage them to run through walls for me. So I'm using my stories to sort of like cover for the things that I can't do, which is what I do all the time. My wife has said once that I'm a fundamentally unlikable person who tells a good story. And she was sort of half kidding, but only half kidding. I can get away with a lot if I tell a good story. And so, no, I don't think you can overdo it unless you're not telling an entertaining story, a relatable story. If you're always telling a story where you're the hero, you can absolutely overdo it. But if you're telling good stories, I don't think you can overdo it. Hollywood is not going to close up shop in 2025 thinking, okay, you got enough. There's enough stories out there. Go watch all the movies you haven't watched. They're going to keep producing movies because if it's good, you can't get enough of it.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you, and well said. And so I guess that's where I think many would have a challenge, is how to know when you're doing it right and how to know when you're doing it wrong. And how do you get more right out of it?
Right. It's tricky because 99.9% of the stories that we tell to loved ones who will often not be critical of us. You go home, you tell your spouse a story, they nod and smile. In their head, they might be thinking, is this ever going to end? But they don't say it out loud because they want to stay married to you. Right. So the only way you can sort of figure out if you're actually doing a good job is to be speaking to people who don't have any attachment to you. So like in Boston last night, I was performing in front of 500 people. I knew within a minute whether I was doing a good job or not, because when you're standing in front of 500 people who don't care about you, you learn quickly if you're doing an effective job. In the same way that principal ideally should be figuring out whether he or she are doing a good job. Now, it's possible that it's your daughter's principal. Is that who it
It's
is?
my niece.
Your niece's
Yeah.
principal. he might be doing a great job for 95% of the student body, and your niece might just occupy that sliver of the student body that doesn't want it. Or he might be recognizing that the parents love these stories that I tell and not recognizing that it's not landing with the kids in the same way. Or he might be speaking to a specific kind of kid, but not all kids. And so those are problems that sometimes we have as speakers, where we don't recognize our audience or we don't acknowledge all segments of our audience. But we also have to acknowledge that we're not going to get everybody.
You got it.
If I get 19 of my 22 students on a given day, I'm doing pretty good. I'd like to grab those other three. And if I have to pull them along kicking and screaming, that's what I'll do. But your niece could also just be an outlier, someone who, for whatever reason, has tuned this guy out, whereas other people might still have him tuned in.
Well, her story definitely has me intrigued, and I remembered it, and I want to now listen to. I'm like, I want to listen to the speech, and hear about and see why it worked or didn't work, and whether it resonates or not with me. I think you've nailed it, though. You got to speak to your audience. Not everybody in that audience is going to be receptive, and that's life, right? But
Right.
getting out there, telling your story, and then seeing how it lands is a pathway to getting better stories, writing better stories, or telling better stories in your business. And that's maybe another question here that our listener would have is, okay, so I get that I've got to tell about transformation somewhat, progress, change over time, and got to know my audience. If I want to get this into my business, where am I going to insert story into my business? These are bookkeepers. They own bookkeeping firms. They're selling to small, medium-sized business owners. Where do you see the opportunity there?
Well, I think there's lots of opportunities. I think the first thing I would do is be seeking to insert myself as much as possible into my marketing and sales approach. I bought new windows for my home a couple years ago, a lot of money, and doors too, from the same company. And I had 5 companies come through my home and show me windows. And I didn't choose the most expensive or the least expensive. I didn't even choose the best windows. I chose Trevor Devine's windows, because Trevor Devine walked into my home, saw that there was a 9-iron leaning up against the wall, and said, "Oh, you play golf?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "I play golf too." And then we sat down on the couch, and 25 minutes later, we were talking about golf. And he said, "Maybe I should bring the window in and show it to you now." And I thought, "You don't need to. I'm already buying your windows. Like, we just had a great conversation, and I want to do business with you. As long as the windows are made of glass and, not wood, as long as I can see through them, I'm good." And then as he got up and he started to head towards the door, he looked into the kitchen, saw my wife, and saw a basket of knitting at her feet, and said, "Oh, what are you knitting?" And she said, "Oh, I'm knitting a scarf." And he said, "My wife is actually knitting a sweater right now. It's killing her." They had a 5-minute conversation about knitting. And then Trevor went out to get his window. And I thought, "You're wasting time. Just give me the contract. I'll sign wherever you want to." So, oftentimes if you're a bookkeeper, let's say, you know, all bookkeepers to some degree are going to be equal. I acknowledge there's absolutely going to be some that are better than others. In the same way, my accountant, I like to think, is better than most accountants, and my lawyer is better than most lawyers. But in the end, I think we're not choosing based upon the skill level of a person as much as it is, I want to work with that person. Like, that person's going to be in my life. I'm going to have to pick up the phone and talk to them. I'm going to be sending them emails. And is that going to be a bookkeeper, or is that going to be Joe, this guy that I like who also happens to be a bookkeeper? And so when you're introducing yourself to a new client, or you're pitching yourself to a business, you want to make sure that you're finding ways to strategically let people know who you are, meaning, I am married, which means another human being has agreed to spend theoretically their entire life with me. That's pretty amazing. Like, that's actually a way of signaling that I'm not too weird, because at least one other person has agreed to sort of occupy a home with me, right? If you have kids, you should absolutely be mentioning that, especially if the person on the other side of the table has kids, because now we can relate in a way. I know that you had that camp situation happen. My son is at camp today, and my daughter is in Vermont at a month-long camp. And I just got the first letter from her just before I got on this call, right? But as soon as you said my kid's at camp and we had this logistics situation, I was like, "Oh, I get him completely. I understand. My son's at camp, and we're still trying to figure out who's going to pick him up at 3:30 today." So as soon as you say that to me offhandedly, not even strategically, I automatically feel more connected to you. And now if I'm looking for a bookkeeper, since I have no other options right now, I'm like, I'm going to go with him because he's got kids at camp and I got kids at camp. So I feel like when we have to talk, we're going to understand each other. So the more we can insert our own personal story into the work we do, I think the better off we're going to be. The other thing we can do is what I've already done for you, which is, Matt, how did you end up in the storytelling game? How did this happen? I gave you a very brief, but sort of relatively complete story about how I started on a stage in New York in 2011, and now I work for Microsoft. And I took you on a little bit of a journey. You can be doing the same thing with a customer, right? A customer doesn't necessarily want to know sort of your services and your prices. I think the first thing they want to know is, does this person really care about bookkeeping? Or is this something like their dad told them to study in college because it would earn them a living for the rest of their life? Like, why are they in the field that they're in? Like, quite frankly, I can't imagine being a bookkeeper. It sounds terrible to me. But that's great because I can go find someone who actually has a passion for a thing that I have no passion for whatsoever, right? But if you can demonstrate your passion in a story by explaining, well, listen, I'm a bookkeeper, which doesn't always sound like the most exciting job in the world, but let me tell you why I think it's the best thing in the world for me and why I can help you. That story is going to be engaging to people as opposed to, here are some of the things we offer, here are the prices we offer, here are some customers who are already working with us.
So true. And I think you nailed one. I mean, I don't think there's many that the outlier would be the one that wouldn't get that story to say, you're speaking to an audience that is more like you than like them, and to bring that out into the story. And this is, why I love what I do and why I know you probably don't. But here's what happens when we work together is you get this magical moment where you're able to do more of what you love and I'm able to do more of what I love. And together those things make a better future for your business, your family, and all that good stuff. An interesting way to tackle that. And so bringing those commonalities together with people, giving people a little bit of small journeys, if you will, their journey that you gave us, and doing that, and then finding the common, or letting them get enough that they can find common ground. And where do we put that? Do we put it in our, this is like a conversation. We've met somebody new, we're at a networking event, we're at a family barbecue, someone's wondering what we do. Great. How do we get that out onto where our websites, maybe our YouTube channel, or something? Where do you recommend for that?
I think the same place. Like on most websites, there's going to be sort of an about button where we're going to learn about you. And I think your little journey of how you became a bookkeeper goes on an about section. It says, when I was in ninth grade, I fell in love with math in a way that my classmates clearly did not like math, right? And so I pursued math, and like I went to college and I still found math or finance or whatever it was that brought you to bookkeeping. I think the about page begins with, where did this journey begin? Where am I today? Right. And the journey that in between those 2 points, I think that can go there. On a YouTube channel, I think it's the same thing. I mean, if I was a bookkeeper, it just doesn't sound like the most interesting job, right? Al Capone got, he got buried because of his bookkeeper, right? Like they ultimately found the bookkeeper and he was the one who forced Capone into prison. They're not like it's not the most romantic or sexy profession in the world. I would open a YouTube video, my first YouTube video with, "Hi, I'm a bookkeeper," which I know is not the most sexy sentence that it's ever been said in the world. But let me tell you what actually is exciting about being a bookkeeper. And let me tell you why it gets me out of bed every morning and I'm excited to work with my customers. But that willingness to be vulnerable and say, listen, the thing that I do, I know it doesn't sound like the most exciting thing in the world, but let me tell you why it's exciting to me. And that would probably be my first video. And my next video might be finding the right bookkeeper. And I might tell a story. I'm sure you have stories of bookkeepers who are terrible, or you've heard stories about bookkeepers who are terrible. So my next video might be, let me tell you about the worst bookkeepers in the world. Let me tell you a story about Stanley, right? Stanley, the bookkeeper who I knew 10 years ago, who failed a company. And, as a result, that company no longer exists, right? That's an interesting story to tell. And that's a way of contrasting you to that terrible bookkeeper. I'd be looking to tell stories like that on YouTube channels. And like I said, on those about pages on websites.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love that one. I don't think I love the angle of that. Telling stories is just simply about the experience a bookkeeper had or has had and related to their customer and what their customer might think and how it would shape and shift how they make decisions about, hey, doing business with them or how they do business with them. All sorts of stories could be told throughout the entire life cycle of the relationship, from, hey, we just met, this is what you want, some things you need to think about before you make decisions, and now, hey, we're working together, here's some stories about what's going to make this go really well or what's going to make it go really poorly. The whole journey can have stories embedded and baked into it.
Yeah, and people are interested in the behind the scenes of anyone's job. Stephen King understood this really well. If you read a Stephen King novel, every character has a job, and you get to learn about the character's job along with the monster that's trying to eat them or the serial killer who's hunting them. There still is a job at the heart of every person.
Mm.
And, as unsexy as a bookkeeper might sound, I actually don't know anything about being a bookkeeper either. And so, sort of like the behind the scenes, what does a bookkeeper do on a given day? What does a bookkeeper's worst day look like? What does their best day look like? What was the weirdest day you ever had as a bookkeeper? What was the most difficult client you ever had? Those are all really fascinating stories that allow you to show the profession, demonstrate your expertise by showing the wide range of experiences that you've had, but most importantly, you become a person. It's no longer you're no longer a bookkeeper, you're a guy who tells stories about being a bookkeeper. And we just want to work with those people. We believe more in people. We don't believe in great ideas. We believe in people who have great ideas. We talk more about Elon Musk than we talk about Tesla. We talk more about Steve Jobs than we talk about Apple. We like to know that there are people at the top of things or in charge of things or in the front of things who are dynamic or exciting or interesting or revealing. So being all of that, the more you can be and the more you can differentiate yourself from the other people, the more likely you're going to garner the business you want.
Oh, it's fantastic and great. Some great angles there and content that's available really for them to create. The list goes on. Now, I would imagine, as you've outlined, bookkeepers are good at bookkeeping. They might not be good at getting these out or even beginning to start storytelling. And we talked a little bit about that, but people have to start doing it. That's a start, right? Can't get good at it without doing it. Any other thoughts around, okay, you're a bookkeeper, you're amazing with numbers. How do they just get started?
Well, in terms of storytelling, the person who has the most stories to tell is often the best storyteller. And so finding those stories, gathering your wool so that you can have things to talk about is critical. I would rather hear someone who has 100 stories to tell that sort of is a C- storyteller than some A+ storyteller who only has 2 stories. And I know those people, the people who roll out the same chestnut every day.
Mm.
So, what I tell people is before you sort of even think about telling stories, you have to have content. And so the thing I advise people to do is something called homework for life, which is essentially a means by which you can look at your life and begin seeing the things, the stories in your life that you either are not seeing right now and losing, or seeing and then forgetting, which we do all the time. We move through our lives and things happen to us, moments of meaning and heart and head, and people say things that are strange and fantastic and awkward. All of these things happen to us. And what happens to us as human beings is we just walk past them and we forget them. So if I asked you what you were doing last Thursday was really like pertinent to you. It felt real and visceral. But if you've left Thursday behind and you've not taken a moment to reflect on it and grab some of the things from it, Thursday disappears forever. And so homework for life is a process where I teach people how to just reflect a little more on their lives every day and find those moments of meaning so that they become the person who always has a new story to tell. I have a TED talk on it. It's called Homework for Life. If you just Google the phrase homework for life, it takes about 20 minutes for me to explain the whole process. So it's much easier to just tell your audience, go watch that TED talk. But it's the most important thing I teach, the idea that our days matter and that there's simple, easy ways to hold on to our days. One of the things I love telling people, this is sort of unrelated to storytelling, but related to humanity.
Mm.
When I hear people say that time flies, right? Or parents say, I can't believe how quickly my kid grew up. Neither one of those things are actually true. What happens is, if I asked you to tell me about all the days that you can remember from the year 2021, You, if you're really good, might remember with some specificity 100 days from 2021. So that means you've taken 365 days and reduced it to 100 days, which is why time feels like it flies for you, because you're just throwing days away, and the few that are remaining makes every year feel rather short. Same thing for kids, right? If your child is 15, like my daughter, let's say, and you ask me right now, how many things do you remember from your child's life when she was 4? Right? If you're not engaged in paying attention, recording, remembering, holding on to moments, some people can't remember anything from their child's 4th year of life when they reach the age of 15. And it's not because those days weren't wondrous and fantastic and terrible and memorable. It's that we just threw them away. So our kids feel like they grow up fast because we throw their days away too. Homework for Life is the acknowledgement that every day matters. Every day has something worth holding on to, so that a 365-day year feels like 365, or even better. I find about 7 moments per day that are worth holding on to right now, which has not always been the case. In 2015, I was holding on to about 1.5 moments per day. Now I'm finding 7. It's not because my life is more interesting now than it was in 2015. It's because my lens is sharper, it's wider. I see more things than I used to see. My life feels more full. And so I've taken 365 days and multiplied it by 7. Time does not go quickly for me. It actually goes really slowly. And my 15-year-old daughter, she feels 15. And my 12-year-old son, he feels 12. So when parents say to me, I can't believe how quickly they're growing up, I never have the heart to tell them they're not growing up quickly. You're just ignoring what is happening around you, not noticing it, and failing to record it. So Homework for Life, in addition to giving you all the stories you want to tell for these things that we've been talking about, it just makes you more aware of the world and makes you feel better about the life that you're living.
Wow, that's a surprise benefit of talking about stories, and how apropos to my situation today. I mean, how many days like today where I need to, I've been at camp 3 times, and early pickup and all that good stuff. There's, miraculous things happening every single day, but yet they're in the rearview mirror, and I can't even remember last Thursday, let alone this Thursday or Wednesday or whatever day it is.
Yes.
So that's beautiful. And then, yes, paying attention to what's going on gives us content for stories, and lovely stories, way more lovely stories than just talking about the instructions or a replay of what is going on in life. I can see it. It leads to a richer life, and you can share more of that richness with others.
Yeah, it's life changing, and I'll tell you, everyone can do it. My 10-year-old students, I teach them Homework for Life, and some of those students are now 25 years old, and they email me and say, like, thank God, how many people actually have at least one moment captured from every single year of their middle, high school, and college career? Most people can't remember anything from middle school, and my students who are doing Homework for Life remember multitudes from their middle school and high school careers because of it. I wish someone had taught me. I'm frustrated that I had to be the one to figure this out later in life. I'm angry at my teachers for not teaching me this when I was their age, because I would have loved to have those moments too. I'm thrilled with what I have, and I'm grateful that I found it when my kids were born. Prior to their birth, I was essentially doing Homework for Life. But yeah, it's the most important thing that I teach, and it's the most important thing I think that you can learn to change your life.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's no better time than the present to take on something, anything, right? I'm in the same boat as you. Was just thinking about it the other day, how, the memories of childhood and high school and college and all that stuff are starting to get a little fuzzy.
Yeah,
And it's like, oh, so this is how this goes. If we
right.
don't record it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's gone forever. And even if you can't remember it, as long as you have a record of it, I love going back and reliving a year. Let me go relive 2017. And as soon as I read what happened in 2017, these little snippets that I have, I'm right back in that moment. I'm
Yes.
returned to the year in a way that's really wonderful and meaningful. So, and again, there's no one I know who has more stories to tell than I do. And it's not because I'm a unicorn in any way. It's simply because I am relentlessly obsessed with the idea that my days are worth holding on to.
Nice. That's wonderful. Well, there's some great stuff there. You talked about the YouTube link, Homework for Life, TED Talk. We'll put that show link in there. I think that's a great starting place. You've also written a new book. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, in 2017, I wrote a book called Storyworthy, which essentially sought to teach people how to tell stories. And over the course of the next couple years, the business world found that book, and they started sort of using it relentlessly. It became very popular in the business world, but it wasn't written for business people. It really was written for people who just want to tell stories, whether it's at a dinner table or, at a cocktail party or on a stage in the places where I perform stories. But the business community sort of like took it and fit a square peg into a round hole. And they did a decent job of like gleaning wisdom from it and bringing it to the work they do. My new book, Stories Sell, is sort of that square peg into the square hole. It says, I've worked with companies, huge and small, and entrepreneurs and leaders of all kinds over the last 10 years. Let me tell you how we've applied storytelling to the work that I do in those places. So it is much more aligned to people who are doing business, who are seeking investment, leaders who are, looking to improve their communication and their, inspirational addresses and their all hands meetings, all these things that leaders are doing on a regular basis. So it's helping people build pitch decks in more effective ways. It's teaching them how to brand their company in more effective ways, just through the lens of storytelling.
Oh, that's lovely. Sounds like a great book. Perfect for our listener. Perfect for me. I look forward to getting it. And what I would imagine Amazon, or is there a place you prefer people to get a copy of that book?
Oh, no, wherever you get books is great. I mean, I love it when you support an independent bookseller, if that's possible. If you have one in your town, that's fantastic. But I just get it wherever. I tell people, like, buy 12 copies, actually. That's what I really want. I want you to buy 12, read one, and keep the 11 on the side. Use them as doorstops. Just buy tons of them.
Okay, perfect. Well, I always think, if you want to give your customers a gift, it's great to give them a gift that's going to help them improve their business. And this sounds like one of those books, perfect for their customers.
I love that idea. I'm going to use that in future interviews rather than
So
suggesting
don't use them as a doorstop. Buy 12,
right.
Read the
Yes.
one, and then
I like yours better.
Yes.
This is a better idea. Buy it as a gift, early holiday shopping for your customers. Yes.
And then I can one up it. Then tell that customer to buy 11 books and give those books to their customers. Yes. Because you tell a better story, it's going to build a better business. And that's what you're all about. And also get the story out about Homework for Life, which they're going to need to learn about to tell a better story. So it all works together and makes the world a better place.
Yeah, I'm all with you on that. I often tell businesses, I was at a big conference last week in Arizona, and I spoke for a while, and at the end I always say, I'm here to help. It was real estate people. I said, I'm here to help you sell more real estate and get more investment in your real estate ventures, but really I'm here to make you a better person. Like, I tricked these people to bring me into the conference to help you with your sales, but really what I want you to do is just to be a better storyteller for your kids, for your spouse, for your parents, for your neighbors, for the people you walk the golf course with, for the people you're playing pickleball with. Like, I just want you to be a better storyteller, because that makes for a better human. And if it also helps you sell more things or garner more clients, I think that's a wonderful additive. But I think we should just be telling better stories and telling more stories.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Matthew, this has been an absolute treat having you on the show. I've learned a ton. I can't wait to dig into the YouTube of your Homework for Life. I'm going to get the book and start reading it myself and get that book and gift that book to people that are special in my life. I want to thank you for the work you're doing to make the world a better place.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and best of luck to you and all of your listeners and all the things you're trying to accomplish.
The pleasure is all ours, and we appreciate you. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.